Hello, everybody. This is Tyler Toast, and today I wanted to talk about my prediction for the standings for the 2019 to 2020 season in the NHL. I'll go division by division, starting from the Atlantic to the Metro to Central, then Pacific, going up, starting at 8, and then going to 1. And then at the end, I'll draw a line at where I think that the break in the playoffs will be. So to start off, the Atlantic Division, probably the easiest pick in the entire video for any standing. The Ottawa Senators. They're still in a state where their goaltending is bad, their forwards are bad, except for Brady Tkachuk and a couple other pieces here and there that are decent, but those decent pieces probably should be second, third line, and they're playing first line. And their defense is bad. I mean, they're rebuilding. This is how they're going to be for a little while. And just overall, the team's a mess and should be bad for a while, I think. Even though they have good prospects, I don't see things getting better anytime soon. So, number 7 in the Atlantic, I have the Detroit Red Wings, which I think that they'll be better than most people think. Most people have them second to last in the league or bottom 3 and I do have them low in the standings, but they'll be competitive. Their young prospects will come in and do really well. Yes, I know Zadina's playing in Grand Rapids this year, which I did expect him to have a good year, but it looks like that's not going to happen. I think Dylan Larkin will take a step forward. The big factor holding them back, though, is they need younger defensemen, and they need a goalie to take over when Howard's gone. And Howard, I don't even trust to be their starter really anymore. He had a really good first half of the season last year. That's why he made the All-Star game, but I don't trust him. Number 6 in the division will come as a surprise that I have them below number 5, and that's the Montreal Canadiens. I think that last year was a fluke year for them. Beginning of the year last year, everyone was saying Ottawa and Montreal. Those are your bottom 2 teams in the league. And Montreal surprised and almost made the playoffs. Mainly based on a career year from Max Domi. And I think that's all it was. I think it was a career year. He's going to be good again, but he's not going to be nearly as good as he was last year. Carey Price, I think he's a little bit overrated, but he's still a very good goaltender. And their defense outside of Shea Weber, which yet again, he could very well get hurt again. That's lacking. And if Domi takes a step back, their center depth is horrible. With Deneau as their first line center, which probably your preference with him is third, maybe if you need him second line. But they need a center, they need defense. And maybe they need to go through a little bit of a retool, I don't know. Number 5 in the division, I have the Buffalo Sabres. Most people think that's too high. They'll say, well, even if what you're saying about Montreal is true, Buffalo will still be worse than them. But I think that they'll do better. Last year, they were near the top of the league for the first half of the season, and it looked like a guarantee to make the playoffs for most of the year. And then they basically fell off a cliff. Goaltending and defense being a huge factor of that. I think Ullmark will take a step forward this year and be a better goalie than he was last year. And just overall, I expect more consistency from the team. Dahlin will take a step forward, be a star defenseman this year, and will be another reason why their goaltending will improve. A better defense around them from just their young guys getting better. Number 4 in the Atlantic Division, Stanley Cup finalist, Boston Bruins. Any other division, I probably have them win the division. And because they're stuck in the Atlantic, they're stuck at 4th. And just their roster is so good with a very good offense, very good defense, and very good goaltending, both the starter and the backup. I do think Tuukka Rask is a little overrated. People overrate what he did in the playoffs and think that's Tuukka. But I think that really it's somewhere he didn't have a great regular season and just went on a hot streak, I think. And he kind of lost them game 7. But overall, even if he is just an average goalie, the entire roster is so good in Boston that 4th in the division is the absolute lowest I could see them being. I could see them being as high as 1st if other teams don't pan out the way I think they will. They're a really good team. Number 3 in the division, Florida Panthers. Last year I had them making the playoffs too. So take it with a grain of salt. It seems like they're always the hot pick to make it from teams that missed, and they fall short. But this year's different because they have goaltending. And Luongo was unpredictable because of his age, and Reimer was a backup last year. Bobrovsky not only is seen as a starter, he's seen as an elite starter, one of the best goalies in the NHL. And yes, their defense struggled a bit last year, but I think that adding Stralman will help. Probably pair him with Keith Yandle. Yandel's a very good offensive defenseman, and then Stralman will help be reliable on the back end. And Barkov, I think, is one of the most... He's not underrated anymore because everybody says he's underrated, but he's still a phenomenal player. And Huberdeau had a great year last year. I think he'll continue from that. And overall, I just think the team's going to be really good. Number 2 in the division, the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, they're known as a choking team. They always lose in the first round. They can't beat Boston. They got defense. That trade that they made with Colorado, everyone talks about how Nazem Kadri's huge for Colorado. What about what Tyson Barrie will do for Toronto? I think Tyson Barrie's a very good defenseman and will do wonders for them. They actually have a good defense this year. And they have a chance at losing a lot of their players next year, like a Tyson Barrie. And if they want to do damage in the playoffs, I think this is the year. And I honestly think that this is the team to be scared of in the playoffs. I don't have them winning the cup, but they can do damage. And that just leaves one team left in the Atlantic. Everyone knows them as a team that chokes, the Tampa Bay Lightning. There's no holes in their roster. Their goaltending, they have one of the best goalies in the NHL in Vasilevsky, and he's young. Their backup last year, McElhaney, was a phenomenal split starter for Carolina. And their third string, Domingue, he wasn't a bad backup for them last year. And on offense, if you have an offense that has either Braden Point or Steven Stamkos on your second line, that is insane. And their defense, they have 2 top 20 defensemen in their roster, I think, in Victor Hedman and Ryan McDonough. And then they still have Sergachev, who has the potential to be a top 20 defenseman in the league. He's still young, and he's really good. Just, there are no holes in that lineup. And they somehow manage to stay under the cap. They ended up being lucky with Ryan Callahan needing to retire. That saves them some cap space, but overall, just so good. But the thing is, can they win in the playoffs? Everyone says that they're a team that chokes, but really it's just this year for the most part. Yes, they haven't won a cup, but they've never been a team to win the cup until last year and the year before. So that's the Atlantic Division. Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal, Buffalo, Boston, Florida, Toronto, and Tampa. And I could see a lot of movement in the top 4. I can't really see any other movement. Just The Atlantic has high-end talent there. The top four is the best top four in the NHL, but the bottom four, you can argue, is one of the worst bottom fours in the NHL. Now I move on to the Metropolitan Division. And coming in last, the Columbus Blue Jackets. They lost a lot. Last year, they barely made the playoffs, and they made that huge push after they got Duchesne and Dzingel. They're both gone. Star forward Artemi Panarin is gone, and star goaltender Sergei Bobrovsky is gone. I don't think that losing Panarin will hurt as badly as losing Bobrovsky, because I do not trust either Korpisalo or Merzlikins to take over that starter job. If they do, and they do well, that defense is good enough that they could squeak into the playoffs, especially in the Metro where everything is so tight, where honestly, I say Columbus is the only safe pick to miss the playoffs in the Metro. 1 through 7, I could see the team I have in 7th and 1st, or the team I have 1st and 7th. It's so close. And consistent goaltending is all Columbus needs to jump in to be one of those teams that are tight with them. Number 7 is a controversial pick. The Pittsburgh Penguins. So, they have Crosby, they have Malkin, they have Letang, and they have Gensel. And they don't really have much else, though. Yes, Matt Murray can be good. He's too inconsistent, in my opinion, to be the starting guy for a contending team. But he could bring you to the playoffs, which he's shown before. And yes, they also have Galchenyuk and Bukestad, who are both good players. They'll probably end up on the first, second line with Crosby, Malkin. But outside of that, they're missing depth. And they barely made the playoffs last year. Yes, they ended up in a divisional spot, but both Carolina and Columbus were extremely close to them points-wise. And they got worse. Losing Phil Kessel will hurt them. Yes, he might have been a locker room cancer, which people say that about him a lot, but they're going to miss his skill. Number 6 in the division. It's another team that made the playoffs last year that I have missing. The New York Islanders. So, I think that the Islanders had a first-year Vegas season. Where we're the misfits, we're the team that's thrown out, the team that everyone says will do nothing. Let's prove them all wrong. They got a new coach in Barry Trotz, they got the new GM in Lou Lamoriello, and had an amazing season. The offense wasn't there, but the defense was unstoppable. And then they went on to sweep the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round. They were fantastic. And even last year, I said, going into the season, the Islanders, I don't have them making the playoffs, but they're my dark horse team. This year, they're not my dark horse team. But overall, the Islanders, they don't have the talent on their roster. Even on defense, which they defended so well last year, it's full of number 4, number 3 defensemen, and it's not good enough. And you look at goaltending, too, and I think Varlamov is a huge step down from Lehner. And people say Lehner's career year last year, he's only had one bad year in his career, and everyone thought that was him. I love the pickup of Lehner, and that's why last year I said that they were the dark horse team, because they got Lehner. Yes, Barry Trotz could bring any team to the playoffs for the most part, but in how tight the Metro Division is, I don't see their talent being close enough to the teams above them to pass them. Without Trotz, they're below Pittsburgh and probably even below Columbus. Number 5 in the division is a team that had a very good offseason, the New Jersey Devils. So the Devils, they got first overall pick Jack Hughes. They traded for PK Subban for basically nothing. They got Wayne Simmons, who, if he has a bounce back year, will be phenomenal. And bargain of a contract. Yes, it's 1 year, but still. And they got Nikita Gusev. Overall, things look great in New Jersey. And yet again, they're stuck in, we're in the Metro Division, we're in the East, so we might not make the playoffs. And as a Ranger fan, obviously, I hope that they miss. So this might be a little biased, but I forward-wise, they're set. Maybe they need a first-line center. I don't trust Hischier to be that number one center quite yet in his career. He will be there soon, though. But other than that, forward-wise, lines 1 through 4, they're really good. I don't trust their defense. Subban had a bad year last year. Even if he bounces back, though, I don't really see a number 2 defenseman. Butcher might take that step forward. They got Severson and Vatanen, too. They've got to hope that Vatanen has a contract year. And they also have to hope that Hall resigns, which is a huge part of why they need to do well this year. But in net, Corey Schneider and Mackenzie Blackwood. Blackwood had a good year last year when he played. But there's a thing with rookie goalies when they first come into the league that teams don't know their weaknesses, so they'll put up phenomenal numbers. Look at Jordan Binnington. I'm a huge Binnington fan, but if you look at his numbers when he first came in, and it was like a .930 regular season save percentage, whereas in the playoffs, I think he had about a .914, which he's still a very good goalie, but he's not at that elite level, which it showed when he first came into the league. So I don't see Blackwood being the guy that's able to propel them into the playoffs. And I've been saying for a few years that Schneider's been due for a bad year, and that he's going to stay there. I don't think that it was just a bad streak that Schneider had. I genuinely think that this is Schneider. He's not going to be as bad as he was when he hadn't won in over a calendar year, but he's not going to be as good as he was after he finally got that win. Number 4 in the division. I wish I could put them higher. The New York Rangers. So, the Rangers are the only team that I think had a better offseason than the Devils. They added Artemi Panarin. They drafted second overall Kaapo Kakko, who I think is more NHL ready and will have a better first season than Hughes, but Hughes might be better later in his career. And they traded for Jacob Trouba and gave up Neil Pionk, who is very good offensively, but lacks a lot defensively. Overall, their team got so much better. But there are signs of worry. Philip Cheadle being moved to Hartford and Vitaly Kravtsov going to Hartford kind of scare me with them, because I had them both being big impact guys on that third line. So that does hurt them. I don't think it hurts them enough to make them fall lower, because of what I've also seen from other players like Lias Anderson in the preseason. Or I think Anderson could very well jump into that second line center if he continues what he did in the preseason. Overall, their defense, they're a little lacking there. Their top pairing of Shea and Trouba, it's a risky pairing. It's a good pairing, but it's risky. If you put in this pairing with Shea in his rookie year, it's a phenomenal pairing. Last year, Trouba had 50 points, and Shea has been kind of disappointing from what we saw in his rookie year and what we expected. I think that has a lot to do with you're the guy on defense, and you're not ready for it yet. So I think this year, having a Trouba with him will help him tons. And then after that, you got D'Angelo, Stahl, Fox, and Hayek. Having 2 rookies on defense is risky too. Fox and Hayek. Hayek looked really good in his stint in the NHL. He struggled in the AHL though, but NHL is more controlled. Sometimes more ready players do better in the NHL than the AHL. And Fox looks like he's going to be really good, but it's risky again. And then forward-wise, like the Devils have a solid first through fourth line, and then your next three guys, Philip Hedl, Vitaly Kravtsov, and Bunievis, they all deserve regular roster spots if the Rangers didn't have such a deep roster. The only gap there is the second-line center. Mika Zibanejad is a phenomenal first-line center, but there's worry with the second-line center, whether it's Ryan Strome, Elias Anderson, or Brett Howden. I don't see any of them right now being ready for the second-line role. Anderson, like I said, in the preseason, showed that he could be ready. I'm not sure, though. And then goaltending, Henrik Lundqvist and Alexander Georgiev with Igor Shesterkin in the minors. I think Lundqvist will have a really good year this year. I think that he knows next year is probably the last year of his career. Yes, this year and next year left on his contract. And then the Rangers they have Georgiev and Shesterkin as their two. They don't need Lundqvist anymore after there, and he wants to play his career with the Rangers. And he's going to have such a drive to win the Cup now, which, yet I don't have the Rangers winning the Cup. I think Lundqvist will put up phenomenal numbers, especially with Georgiev being trusted to play probably around 30 games, I would think. And I think Georgiev will take a step forward and have a really good season too. Which, overall, looking at all that it's a risk. Rangers are very unpredictable, but I think that they'll end up fourth in the division. Third in the division, the Philadelphia Flyers. So, 2 years ago, Flyers aren't making the playoffs. I say they are. They make the playoffs. Last year, there's no way the Flyers miss the playoffs. I say that they will. I don't trust their goaltending. They miss. This year, it's about 50-50 with people thinking they will and won't make the playoffs. They fix their goaltending. Carter Hart's ready. And he's young. Yes, he will struggle at some points, as any young goaltender will. But he's good enough that he can carry them to the playoffs. Their forward depth is unbelievable. Defense with Gostisbehere and Provorov, that's really good. Yes, they had iffy years last year, but I expect big bounce backs. And overall, I don't see a reason why they can't make the playoffs or be that good. The only problem is teams below them that could bounce ahead of them, like the Rangers or the Devils or the Islanders or the Penguins. Just so hard to predict the Metro. Second in the division, made it to the conference finals last year, the Carolina Hurricanes. Their whole goaltending. Forwards, they're set. Defense, they're set. I don't trust Mrazek. They have arguably one of the best defense scores in the entire NHL, 1-6. And having Fleury and Van Riemsdyk on that bottom pair is very good. And forward-wise, it's really good with Aho, Teravainen, Niederreiter, Svestikov. He'll probably continue his growth next year. And then maybe Bach can make the lineup this year at some point. But I don't trust Mrazek 100%. And I honestly would rather have Nedeljkovic as the backup than Reimer. But we'll see what happens with them. And then, first place in the Metro, that leaves the Washington Capitals. You can't count them out at any point. You have Ovechkin, Backstrom, Kuznetsov, John Carlson, TJ Oshie, Brandon Holtby. It's a really good roster. And especially with Ovechkin winning, 100 Richards? they're not falling out of the playoffs. I could see them moving around within the playoffs, but they're not missing unless there's like a big injury to either Alex Ovechkin or John Carlson. And Brandon Holtby, I do think he's a bit overrated. It seems like every year we talk about, well, Holtby's having a bad year this year at some point in the season. We say that. And then he kind of has a little bit of a bounce back. But Holtby and Backstrom on expiring deals. I think that they'll do really well to get big money contracts. And the question is, after this season, where do they go? Do they have another Columbus where they just leave? Or do they decide to stick it around in Washington because they still have a very good roster and think they could win? All right, so there's your Metro Division. Columbus, Pittsburgh, the Islanders, New Jersey, the Rangers, Philadelphia, Carolina, and Washington. And like I said, hardest division to predict. 1 to 7, there could be any movement. And now to the Central Division. Number 7, an easy pick. Hold on a sec. The Minnesota Wild. They need to rebuild. And their GMs won't. They picked up Zuccarello, which is a very good addition, and yeah, I could see them bouncing into the playoffs possibly, jumping ahead of my next two teams. But they're not going to do anything in them. They are consistently good but not good enough. And I think that's where they are now. They're last in a division just because they're in the Central. But they're not good enough to do anything if they make the playoffs. Number 6 in the division. Made some key additions in the offseason. Got a lot better. Especially picking up Robin Lehner. The Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago is good. They're really good. And, well, they're a team that's hard for me to pick to miss the playoffs, but just based on the teams above them, I can't really see it happening. I can see them jumping ahead of the team that I have right above them because of a lot of question marks, mainly of one of their star defensemen, but Chicago, I don't trust Corey Crawford, but they have Robin Lehner now. Their offense is really good. I do predict DeBrincat to hit 50 goals this year. Their defense is a bit weak, though. That's where I have them falling off, their defense. But overall, though, it's a good team. Not great, but it's a young team. And they'll be back in the playoffs within the next 2 years. Number 5 in the division. The Winnipeg Jets. If you told anyone at the start of last year, Winnipeg next year, people will think that they're a wild card or maybe even miss the playoffs. They'll laugh. Winnipeg's picked to win the cup. Winnipeg is picked to win the division. They're a phenomenal team. And myself included, I had Winnipeg winning the cup last year. But their defense it got stripped down bad. They lost Jacob Trouba. They lost Tyler Myers. They lost, I think it was Josh Morrissey. And looks like that they might lose Dustin Byfuglien. Morrissey, I'm not 100% if that's right. They lost, no. Morrissey's still there. Sherratt left. And yes, they added Neil Pionk, but like I said when I talked about the Rangers, he's not very reliable defensively. Their offense is still deadly. If Laine bounces back, you still got Mark Scheifele and one of the most underrated players in the NHL in Blake Wheeler. You got Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers. You do still need to fill out that second line center, but Other than that, their offense is deadly, which is why they're still that high. And their goaltending, Connor Hellebuck and Laurent Brossoit, they're very good. And they did just lose Comrie off waivers, which we'll see what Arizona does with him because they have Kemper and Ronta, which is weird. But I don't know. Winnipeg they've been weird this year. Number 4 in the division, I have the overrated Colorado Avalanche. They're not as good as everyone says. Look at their roster. Yes, they got Rantanen back. Yes, they added Kadri. Look at that defense and look at that goaltending. Can you trust it to be a high-end team, a cup champion team? And I say no. Forward-wise, yes, they did fix it a lot. Their second-line guys are second-line guys, and maybe a little bit worse. You would not trust them to jump onto your top line if someone gets hurt in the McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog line. And they are not going to be as good as everyone says. I don't even see it being close, really. They're a wild card team, but I could see them fall. That's the highest I could see them being. I could see Winnipeg being better than them. I could see Chicago being better than them. Or I could see some Pacific teams that I have being worse than them being better than them. Now in the Central. Still in the Central. 3rd in the division. Defending Stanley Cup champions, St. Louis Blues. Like I mentioned with Binnington before, he had, I think it was a .930 save percentage in a regular season. That was a huge reason of their bounce back. And then a .914-ish in the playoffs. They're still a very good team. Offense, Tarasenko, O'Reilly, Shen, Schwartz, you name anyone. It's solid. And yes, they lost Maroon, but he was a bottom 6 guy for them. It's really good there. Defense, Pietrangelo. They just added Justin Falk. They have... I'm blanking on names right now, but they have some really good pieces on defense too. Their roster is solid. And I think that Jake Allen will thrive as a backup this year. Full year as a backup, I think his problem has been his stamina. He can't play that many games. And that's what makes the team struggle. He's still a very solid NHL backup. 2nd in the division, the team that came closest to eliminating the St. Louis Blues, Dallas Stars. 1 overtime goal away from defeating the current Stanley Cup champions. And 1 overtime goal away from the Rangers getting their 1st round pick. But adding Joe Pavelski is huge. Pavelski is a borderline elite talent. And they got him without having to give up anything off their roster. You could say they had to give up Zuccarello to really fit him in the cap. They were losing Zuccarello anyway. They didn't want to give the Rangers the 1st round pick. But essentially, all they did to get Pavelski was they lost Zuccarello. And I do think Pavelski's an upgrade, even though I do think Zuccarello is one of the more underrated players in the league. And overall, Heiskanen will continue to thrive. Bishop had a very good year last year. I don't think he'll be quite as good, but he'll still be really good. And I don't know. Ben will have a bounce back year. He had a very bad year last year. I cannot see him not bouncing back. And if he doesn't, you throw Pavelski on that line instead and you're set. Now, 1st in the Central Division, all that leaves is the Nashville Predators. They did what I've been saying they needed to do. They got rid of a defenseman and added to their forward depth. They got rid of PK Subban, who had a very bad year for them last year. And yes, it was a bad trade. They could have gotten more. But the Devils took his entire contract, which I needed, which was to sign Matt Duchene. Do I think Duchene's overrated? Yes. Do I think he's overpaid? Yes. But him in that 1st or 2nd line center for them, That's what they needed. And that's all they were missing, I think. Pecorine, he'll have a phenomenal year. They still got Roman Josi, Matthias Ekholm, and Ryan Ellis on defense. And you got Forsberg, like I said, Duchesne. I'm blanking on the guy's name, but there's another really good forward that they have too. And with Soros as the backup, if Rene goes down, say for injury, they still keep going at the same pace, I think. And Nashville's deadly. Look out for them. Now moving on to the Pacific Division. Oh, first, let's recap the Central. Minnesota, Chicago, Winnipeg, Colorado, St. Louis, Dallas, Nashville. And my concern with that is, top three I think are solid. They can move around. And then below that, I think teams could be worse than we think. Chicago and Minnesota could be better. Colorado, Winnipeg could be worse. We'll see what happens. Last place in the Pacific Division, though. The Los Angeles Kings. Quick had a horrible year last year. And I do think he'll bounce back. There's no way he could be as bad as he was last year with how good he's supposed to be. But even with that, they're still missing something. Their defense isn't that good anymore. Forward depth, they got Kopitar, and that's about it. And yes, they still have Doughty, too, on defense, which is very good, but there's not much else. They got Brown. And I'm a fan of Kempe, but he's not ready to be a star. And the roster scares me for success. And Kovalchuk has been a disappointment for them. And he was supposed to be a star for them, and he's not. Number 7 in the division, the Anaheim Ducks. They'll be good soon. They picked the right time to start rebuilding. Maybe they could have done it a bit earlier, but they picked a good time to start. They have a young roster, and they have some good young players on it, like Steele, and Gibson is the best goalie in the NHL, in my opinion. Their defense is weak, but overall it's not a good team. It's a rebuilding team, though. Maybe they need to trade Getzlaf. They're not going to bottom out with Gibson and net, though. Number 6 in the division, the Edmonton Oilers. They got McDavid. They got Draisaitl. They got Nugent-Hopkins. And that's it on forward. Other than that, they suck. You got guys that should be on the third or fourth line on your first line then. And say they have Draisaitl at center. Yes, he gives you 3 scoring lines. But more so just 3 lines with 1 scoring player on it. And it's going to be rough. Their defense isn't as bad as people make it out to be. They got Larson, they got Nurse, and they got Clefbaum. None of those are number 1 defensemen, but they are top 4. But in net, though, Koskinen and Smith, I could see Smith doing well. He had a good playoff run for Calgary. But he's old, and Koskinen, they gave a big money contract, which I don't think he deserved. It's going to be a rough couple years for them, and their prospects keep being busts. They still don't have Puljujarvi, who everyone seems to forget that he even existed. I forgot until about a week ago. It's going to be rough. Number 5 in the division, it's a team I expect a good year from. The Vancouver Canucks. Pettersson's a bit overrated. He's not a top 50 player yet. But all of the sites, NHL Network, Sportsnet, all that stuff seems to happen there. I think that players after their rookie year or if they're like below 24, they tend to get overrated when they have a very good year. And He's a phenomenal player, don't get me wrong, but a little overrated. Then they still got Brock Besser signed, who might be out for a little while to start the season. Bo Horvat's good. Defense, they got Myers and Edler as their top guys. And they got Demko and Markstrom as their tandem. Which overall, if you look at their roster, it's unspectacular, but it's good. It's not a roster that can bring you into the playoffs, but it's a roster of a team that you say, maybe there's something there soon. They added JT Miller, and I think next year, as soon as next year, they could come back into the playoffs. And they better hope that's the case, with Tampa having their first round pick, either this year or next year, depending on playoffs this year. They better hope one of these 2 years they make the playoffs, or their GM's in trouble. Number 4 in the division. If you saw my previous video, you already know this. The San Jose Sharks. They're good. Forwards are good. Defense is good. Goaltending's not. Jones had a horrible year last year. Then did pretty well in the playoffs. I expect somewhere in between. I don't trust the goaltending at all. Their defense isn't defensive enough, though. They got Burns, Carlson as their top 2. And they can't. If it was a team of Burns and Carlsons on their defense, they can't keep the puck out of their own net. People always say that Burns is a forward. I think that he's a very good defenseman, better than Carlson. And I saw so many times last year in the playoffs, someone on St. Louis, when they played San Jose, would skate up Carlson's side, hit the puck off the boards, and now they're on a breakaway. Just Carlson doesn't have the foot speed anymore ever since the playoffs where Ottawa lost to Pittsburgh in the conference finals. And forward-wise, yes, they're still solid. Thornton on the third line, probably. That's really good, but they need to be able to keep pucks out of their own net. And losing Pavelski, now they might not be able to score at a pace to overwhelm them not scoring. Or being scored against. That leaves number 3 in the division, the Arizona Coyotes. It's quite the opposite of San Jose. They can defend. Their forwards are defensive forwards like Derek Stepan. Their defense, they got Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Nicholas Hjalmarsson, and those are solid. And in net, you have, in my opinion, a top 5 tandem in Raanta and Kemper. And they just picked up Comrie to be their number 3 or 4 goaltender. And they have Adin Hill as the other guy. And this is insane how good their goaltending is. It very much reminds me, not to be biased, but the Rangers goaltending with Lundqvist, Gorgiev, Shesterkin, and Huska. Very reminiscent of that, I think. And you're going to have a hard time scoring against Arizona if you're another team in the league. They almost made the playoffs last year. If Colorado didn't get hot at the end of the year, they would have made the playoffs. And the team's good. They don't score enough to be a playoff threat, I think. But they'll keep pucks out of their net. They'll be like the Islanders last year. Second in the Pacific, the Calgary Flames. Their forward depth is insane. With Monahan, Gaudreau, and Lindholm on that top line, they're set. Defense, they got Giordano, and Brody, and Hannafin, and other great defensemen. They're set there. The only hole is goaltending, where they have Cam Talbot and... Why am I blanking on his name? Cam Talbot and David Riddick. It's a risky tandem. Nobody expects much of it. I do think Talbot will have a bounce back year, but I don't think that he'll get the shot to be the starter until near the end of the year. And hopefully Riddick can take a step forward. And the defense will make up for the goaltending. And they'll be able to score. So they're kind of set. And that leaves first in the division, the Vegas Golden Knights. Last year I had almost missing the playoffs. And they almost did this year. I think they were 16th in the NHL. In the East, they would have just squeaked. No. In the East, I think they would have missed. But adding Mark Stone is insane for them. Yes, they had him last year, but not till the second half. And Stone's good. It's underrated, and he'll do a lot for them. Their defense, they need a defense star. Right now, their number one defenseman is Nate Schmidt. That's not good enough. I think Fleury will start to regress a bit. Forward-wise, they're really good from lines 1 to 4, and they have players on the third line that you could argue could be on their first. So looking at all this, in the Pacific, you have LA, Anaheim, Edmonton, Vancouver, San Jose, Arizona, Calgary, and Vegas. So where do I draw the line for playoffs? So, starting the Atlantic. The line's here. Buffalo won't make the playoffs. And I feel like that's a pretty safe bet. Tampa, Montreal, Florida, and Boston are your playoff teams there. Which means that 4 teams in the Metro make it. Washington, Carolina, Philadelphia, and the New York Rangers. Which there's no safe bets with predicting the Metropolitan Division. I do think that that'll be what it is, and I wouldn't be upset if the Rangers missed, even though I'm a Rangers fan. The rebuild's not over yet. I think that Kreider could be traded still. Nemestikov and Strome and Foss are all on expiring deals. We'll see what happens. The Central 5 teams will make it. Nashville, Dallas, St. Louis, Colorado, and Winnipeg. Winnipeg's a risky pick to have over San Jose, but I think that their firepower is good enough. And in the Pacific, Vegas, Calgary, and Arizona. And San Jose could easily squeak in there and go past Arizona or Winnipeg. But we'll see what happens. So here are my predictions and the playoff teams. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And thanks for watching. Have a great day.